but you do a really good job of kind of describing dog psychology and how it relates to humans. And one thing that really stuck out to me is you talk about how instinctive dogs are to picking up body language because they don't speak, they don't think like we do, they don't think with a voice. It's so pretty much all they have to pick up on is body language and how much better they are at that than humans. So I'd like you to go into that a little bit.
Sure. So, a lot of times you hear people talk about, dogs can smell fear. And while, yes, there is a, a hormonal shift that I think you could argue that there's some scent associated with that. Primarily, the way that dogs read people is through nonverbal communication and body language. And a good, I think, way to look at the disparity in terms of how much better they are than human beings are is that, we think about this podcast as an example. Think about the amount of information that's been exchanged between us in the couple hours we've been sitting here. Body language has played a role in what we've talked about, but very little comparative to, the verbal exchange word-wise. And so if you think about, you're at a Walmart parking lot, you can see what kind of fucking day somebody's having by them walking across the parking lot 300 yards away, having never met them, not talking to them, can't hear them speaking if they are, but you have a good idea if that day is the most miserable day of that person's life, or if they're happy, or if they're in a hurry, or if they're confused, or they're frustrated. You can get a good idea of that from that far away with all of those intangibles. And think about, again, how that's, even though it's that easy for us to see that, that's not how we primarily communicate. Now with a dog, they don't talk at all the way that we do. They don't have an internal monologue. They don't use logic and reason to figure things out. So every interaction that they have with every other animal, every person, all of that shit is, overwhelmingly nonverbal, and body language. And so one of the problems you run into as a handler is cueing the dog, and so they're picking up on something as simple as eye movement. Interact with your dog and just look like that. And a lot of times you can get your dog to be like, what the fuck is, what is he looking at over there? Or think about the mood that you're in. How many times have you been in a situation where you're frustrated at something that has nothing to do with the dog, and your dog picks up on that and decides, I'm going to go in the other fucking room.
So they'll pick up on the most minute signals.
Everything. I mean, again, as a handler, it's really difficult to be hyper aware enough to realize the things that you're doing, and it's basic shit. I'm not even talking about handling a dog as a canine handler. I'm talking about when you tell your dog to sit. A lot of times people will do that with their head, sit, and they do that, or they'll tap their finger on their knee when they say here or come or whatever, and not realize that they're doing it, or move their head that way, here or whatever. There's all these little micro gestures and nuances in body language that we as human beings do that accompany what we say to them, or what we mean, or what we're trying to accomplish. And they pick up on that shit all the time. Another example is the context associated with it. You call your dog over, and you have food in your hand. The next word out of your mouth, if the dog knows sit, or you think he knows sit, is going to solicit a sit response from that. And I encourage people to try it. Call your dog over, go through the same mechanisms, the same routine that you always do before you tell your dog to sit, but use a completely fucking different word. When he comes over, say broccoli, and watch your dog fucking sit and look up at you like you told him sit, and it's because you did all of the same fucking things and went through the same cue and the same mannerisms that you always do to tell the dog to sit. Same with grabbing a leash and connecting it to the dog and taking him for a walk. Is that you're doing all these little things that are cueing the dog for them to understand that's what it is. Now, how that relates to stuff like bite work and protection dogs and police dogs and things of that nature is that when people are angry and they're violent and they have an intent to harm, they do certain things. Human beings act a certain way. Cops are very good at reading body language of people because they interact with people all fucking day long, and a few years into being a police officer, they all say the same thing. Like, they get to the point where, just interacting with somebody on a traffic stop, they know, what the fuck, if that person's up to no good, or if they're just in a hurry, or they're having a shitty day, or they're a legit fucking criminal, or whatever. How many times overseas were you somewhere, in Yemen as an example, where you don't speak a lick of the fucking same dialect or language, but that motherfucker is a bad guy. You can just tell by looking at him, same type of shit. And so with them, it's hyper focused that way, and they're absolute masters at reading body language. So when you're training and you're trying to reinforce behavior, it's really crucial that you are really aware of what you're doing, and focus on not doing certain things and trying to remove all of your body language so that you're shaping the behavior without influencing it non-verbally that way.
Wow, I'm almost embarrassed to say, but until I started kind of digging into your content, I had discredited a lot of that with dogs, and not realizing how intelligent they actually are. But will they actually pick up like emotional facial expressions?
Again, it's all part of a big puzzle, right? Is that the dog, just like with, say, you walk into a restaurant, like, are you just pinpointing one thing? No, the facial expressions are part of the context that exists that paints the whole picture of the room. To answer your question, yes, but is it just the facial expression? No, it's what else are you doing? What are you not doing? And so just like with people, dogs identify patterns in behavior, whether you even realize you're doing it or not. If you see somebody, walking through, let's say the mall, right, and it's a middle-aged guy, right, and he's pale-faced and rubbing the back of his neck, and he's looking around. Now, if there's not the context of, well, there's his wife and his 3 daughters that are driving him fucking nuts, that makes sense, right? Because that's the bigger picture. Whereas if that guy's by himself and he's looking around, and now it's like, who's this fucking guy? Or let's say he's at a park with kids, but he has no wife and no kids there. Like, that's way out of fucking place. So with them, it's that same kind of thing, is that when things don't add up, that's when you see them queue up on people, and they're like, wait a minute, let me size this motherfucker up. So they're just like with us. They walk into a restaurant, or we walk into a restaurant, they walk into a crowd or into a room filled with people. They're sizing everybody up, and if nothing is blaringly standing out, they'll fucking ignore it. They'll check, okay, nothing's fucking going on. But this fucking squirrely guy, that's fucking moving, like he's on fucking drugs. Now I'm paying attention to this fucking guy. And so that's how they do it. And pet dogs are no different. It's just how they react to it, or the lack of what they're probably going to do about it is very different, but they still notice it. And that's where it comes into play with training your own dog, is just be hyper aware of what you're doing, and focus on making sure that you're not influencing the dog, unless that's what you want to do in terms of teaching hand signals and shit like that.